Welcome back, everyone, for this last lecture of this 19th annual virtual symposium of the CCHCSP. So I just ask all the people attending to close their camera and mic during the presentation. So for this last lecture on creating networks through leadership, we have the enormous privilege to have Vicki and Fred Modell with us today. So Vicki and Fred Modell established the Jeffrey Modell Foundation in 1987 in memory of their son, Jeffrey, who died at the age of 15 from complication of primary immunodeficiency, a genetic condition that is chronic, serious, and often fatal. The Jeffrey Modell Foundation is a global patient organization devoted to early and precise diagnosis, meaningful treatment, and ultimately care and cure through clinical and basic research, physician education, public awareness, advocacy, patient support, newborn screening, and genetic sequencing. The Jeffrey Modell Center Network includes 900 expert physicians at 386 research, diagnostic, and referral centers in 307 cities, 86 countries, spanning 6 continents, and always growing. The foundation is dedicated to its mission of hope, advocacy, and action by vigorously supporting physician, researcher, young investigator, and the ever-expanding global patient community. So we're very privileged to have Vicki and Fred Modell with us today, and I'm going to give them the mic. Thank you so much for being with us.
You take over, Vicki.
Thank you for that very beautiful introduction. I think you could do my talk for me. Thank you so much. Good afternoon to all our neighbors and friends in Canada. Bonjour, mes amis au Canada. We're so happy to be with all of you. I only wish it could be in person, but one day soon.
I'm going to let you take over.
In order to best understand why Fred and I started this foundation is to get to know the founder and our inspiration, Jeffrey Modell. On September 25th, 1970, our only son, Jeffrey, was born. He came into our lives, as you could imagine, very wanted and very cherished. But how could we know that he would be with us for only 15 years, or how he would change our lives forever, along with the lives of tens of thousands of people he would never meet? Jeffrey's first 10 months were peaceful and happy. He plunged into life with joy and quickly developed the cheerful, outgoing personality that everybody remembers about him. But then things started to go very, very wrong. Just before his first birthday, Jeffrey developed an hepatitis-like condition and was hospitalized with a high fever, jaundice, and a very enlarged spleen. The doctors ordered extensive tests. There was an unbearable wait. And then the diagnosis, hypogammaglobulinemia. In an instant, our world was shattered because on the outside, Jeffrey was so beautiful and he looked so normal. But inside, his immune system, his lifeline, was seriously flawed. The doctors explained the medical aspects of his illness and told us that the prognosis for this condition was uncertain. This alone would have thrown our lives into turmoil, but there were the added anxieties caused by limited medical knowledge at the time. After all, who had ever heard of primary immunodeficiency? What were the causes? What were the effects that it would have on Jeffrey and on our family? How could we explain to him, a child, why he kept getting sick? We could barely understand it ourselves. We sought the best medical opinions, and he had the very best medical care, but science had not caught up to Jeffrey. And the lack of knowledge was truly only part of the problem. In the whole time he was ill, we never met another family, and he never met another child living with PI. Not one. Virtually every other illness had some form of support and information networks that people could access. Primary immunodeficiency had none. But life went on, and Jeffrey had the recurring infections typical of primary immune deficiency, and our lives became a whirlwind of hospitals and doctors' offices. As Jeffrey described, we saw hepatologists, hematologists, immunologists, rheumatologists, oncologists, and as he said, just about every ologist that exists. Every succeeding illness disrupted his young life. There were so many lonely nights in the hospital and so many lonely days at home when he was sick. There were treatments available, but they brought problems of their own. At 3 or 4 years of age, he had to endure painful intramuscular injections of gamma globulin, given with huge needles that left him sore for days. But by the time he was 10 or 11, he started on a clinical trial of intravenous immunoglobulins, and his first treatment was given to him by a world-renowned immunologist in Birmingham, Alabama, Dr. Max Cooper. He then was enrolled at Memorial Sloan Kettering for his care. These treatments sometimes improved his life for weeks at a time, but time will never ease the memories or erase them of those infusions with their many side effects, including chills, fever, headaches, and nausea. But through it all, he managed to thrive. He reached a normal height and weight, and he kept up in school and day camps and sports. But throughout the years, Jeffrey's problems never went away. However, courage and humor were his greatest assets. His determination to never be defined by his disease was inspiring. But the time bomb kept ticking inside him. And there is one story I'd like to share with you that would sum up the whole middle part of his short life. One day he came home from school with a permission slip, bubbling with excitement. His 8th grade class was planning a 3-day whaling expedition on Cape Cod in April. Jeffrey said, "Just sign the slip, just do it right now." And he desperately wanted to go, and we knew it meant everything in the world to him. He was old enough and smart enough to know that there could be consequences and what they would be. Fred and I could only imagine how cold and damp it is on Cape Cod in April. The rustic, unheated cabins that they would sleep in, the wet clothing from the whaling boat. I knew I would have no control over what he wore or if he would be careful. But after all, he was a teenager and he wanted to be just like the rest of his friends. So we weighed the pros and cons. There weren't very many pros except for him, but we knew he loved the sea and boating. So with great trepidation, we signed the permission slip and crossed our fingers. Jeffrey called home several times to say he was having fun and feeling great. He was obviously the greatest actor of all times, an Oscar-winning role, because 3 days later, the bus rolled in and he came off excited and happy and dirty, filled with dirt, with bright blue eyes and shiny red cheeks. I knew those cheeks were a sign of fever. Sure enough, 104. But that trip, those 3 or 4 days were the most memorable, enjoyable, fulfilling days of his life, something he could share with his friends forever. Several of the children landed up with a cold, but Jeffrey landed up in the hospital. But he told his nurses and doctors, who had truly become his best friends, about his trip the whale sightings, the girls. He laughed off the fact that he was now paying for it. He survived and bounced back, but doctors who compared him to a cat with 9 lives told us that he had probably used up 7 or 8 of those lives already. And one day, without warning, he developed hepatitis and then pneumonia. And sadly, it took his life at the age of 15 in 1986. Throughout his life, he would say to us, do something. Mom, Dad, you went to college, you're smart. Do something. And to his doctors, he would say, please do something for me. You went to medical school, you're so smart. How heartbreaking it was for his doctors and his parents to hear this plea, because we knew we were doing everything we could, but science had not caught up to Jeffrey. So when he died, he took away a lot of that fear, our dread, our despair, but we could not let his life be in vain. We had to do something to fulfill his unanswered prayers. Jeffrey never knew how he would change our lives forever and the lives of so many thousands of children that he would never even meet. But in the spirit of his optimism and his courage, we created the Jeffrey Modell Foundation, not in memory of his death, but rather to celebrate his brief but full life. The Jeffrey Modell Foundation is a public charity devoted to early and precise diagnosis, meaningful treatments, and ultimately cures through clinical and basic research, physician education, patient support, advocacy, newborn screening, and now sequencing. Our first project in the 1990s was to develop the 10 warning signs of PI. And we did that with the American Red Cross and our newly established Medical Advisory Board. Since then, the 10 warning signs are in about 60 languages and dialects throughout the world. They've been slightly revised once or twice over the years, but they still remain the 10 warning signs. Dr. Chaim Roifman from Sick Kids in Toronto, one of the great visionaries, encouraged us to create a global Jeffrey Modell Centers Network. That network, as Ellen described, includes 900 expert physicians at 400 academic teaching hospitals, serving 315 cities, 86 countries, and spanning 6 continents. He also helped create the Jeffrey Modell Canadian Network, which exists, and we're so proud, in Toronto, Edmonton, Halifax, Montreal, Vancouver, Winnipeg, and Calgary. We're just about from coast to coast. We've organized more than 50 scientific symposia, and every couple of years, we do a World Immunology Conference, which we call a global get-together, attended by hundreds of clinicians and researchers. We are a well-knit community where collaboration is not only encouraged, it's vigorously upheld and pretty much insisted upon in order to remain in the network. We've partnered with government agencies, including multi-million-dollar collaboration with the NIH. And for the past 15 or 20 years, we've collaborated with the Centers for Disease Control, CDC, to conduct a public awareness and physician education campaign throughout the United States. We've done a public service advertising campaign that appears on television, radio, magazines, billboards, airports, malls, and bus shelters throughout the US. And the media has donated that to us, and it has reached more than $900 million. Patients worldwide are supported by Kids Days and our World Immunodeficiency WIN network, where physicians and nurses can receive travel grants to support their travel, registration, and hotels to attend big national meetings. For a decade, we advocated for newborn screening for SCID, and finally in 2010, it took us 10 years, but in 2010, the United States added SCID to the newborn screening core panel, and now all 50 states are screening. So millions of newborn babies have been screened, diagnosed, transplanted, received gene therapy, and many are cured. So 34 years after its creation, the Jeffrey Modell Foundation continues our mission of hope, advocacy, and action by vigorously supporting physicians, researchers, and the ever-expanding global patient community. We direct our efforts toward earliest diagnosis, meaningful treatments, equal access to care, and ultimately cures. As we look back, it was Jeffrey who created the passion for our work. In a small way, we hope we have been the facilitators and perhaps the glue for advancing science and health policy in all regions of the world. By supporting scientific forums, funding research, supporting young physicians and not so young, professors and researchers, by providing funds, awards, and rewards that enable the best and the brightest to choose immunology as a lifelong career. We hope we have been the critical catalyst for the increased pace of scientific discovery. And we hope that we have influenced and caused positive change for health policy throughout the world. Whether it's funding for newborn screening or support for pediatric immunology, we have advocated before health departments and health ministries across the continents. We've seen great success on this beautiful journey we've been on, but we really still have miles to go. None of our success could have happened without the brilliance and compassion of the doctors, the tender, loving expert care of the nurses, the resolve and dedication of the researchers, the bravery and courage of our families, the vision and constant support of our donors, and most of all, the patients. They are the ones who inspire us, propel us, and compel us to continue this incredible journey. We believe that all together, we can, we will, and we are making a difference. We can meet the challenges, capture the opportunities, and give all our patients for generations to come a brighter, healthier future. Perhaps all of you who are listening here today can ask yourselves, what do you want to leave the world? What will be your legacy? Jeffrey has left his, and he set us on this journey alone to fulfill it. We are doing something. And what he taught us in life is that you need three things: a wishbone, a backbone, and a funny bone. The wishbone is for the ideals, the goals, and the dreams. The backbone is for the fortitude and the courage to pursue them. And the funny bone is for the laughter and tears that are necessary for the little bumps along the road. So we wish all of you, our friends, nos amis, a lifetime filled with more laughter than tears as we all continue to pave these new paths, brave new worlds, and walk new roads along this extraordinary journey. Let's do it for Jeffrey, and let's do it for all his friends. Thank you.
there's Chaim. Hi, Chaim.
Hey, Vanessa.
How are you?
Okay, how are you, darling?
Fantastic. Here comes some bread. I just want to put the PowerPoint up.
Oh, boy, I don't know which button to hit. Come on.
This-
You know, after Vicki goes, there's really nothing. What can I add? I mean, there's very little I can add to what she just did. And she doesn't tell me what she's going to do, and then she does it.
That is not true.
So should we continue on?
Fred, you always say that, but you always provide a great show on your own. So
Okay.
this is not going to be an exception, I'm sure.
Okay, so I have a real point of view, and I want to drive that point of view, and you'll see that it's obvious and it's not subtle. It's very much to the point. I believe we can make it happen, we can make it matter, and we can do it now. That's what awareness, we can do leadership with awareness. So you know about Jeffrey, you've heard about his story. Can we move the things to the right, because I can't see the slides? I'm just going to ask if we can do that.
Let me see if I can get the view. There you go.
That's good.
Yeah, they're all hidden for now, and then we'll bring
Okay.
everybody back.
So how does it move forward?
There you go.
Earliest possible
Yeah,
diagnosis.
so just press this button.
Okay, so
Okay.
that's what we believe in, earliest possible diagnosis. And I want to begin, I told you it would be a little edgy, with the 5 things that will reach earliest possible diagnosis: education, public awareness, networking, newborn screening, and genetic sequencing. We are doing them all now, and you can do them all now too. So here are some facts to think about. You know that rare diseases affect 400 million people with rare disease, 4.8 years on average for an accurate diagnosis. 30% of children with rare disease won't make it to their 5th birthday, and 95% of the diseases lack an FDA-approved treatment. And you know this. Harvard Medical School has a report that says high-quality healthcare costs the world over $6 trillion annually. And our federal government agencies say that when we did our newborn screening, that a contribution to the society is $9.5 to $10 million for every baby we can save. So we know that there's value. So let's talk about step 1. Early diagnosis begins with education. And Vicki talked about the 10 warning signs, which we started in 1994, I think. And that's our educational piece. Here's a physician algorithm. It's now, in 1993, we started with the American Red Cross. 60 countries have translated these warning signs and the testing algorithm for primary care physicians, internists, subspecialists, pediatricians, clinical nurses, payers, patients, government, and the public. Not knowing what you're looking at is a problem. So you have to say, what are the warning signs, and then what can you do about it? Public awareness, you've seen some of the ads that are in the US and in Canada and other parts of the world. And this is just an idea of what they look like. And Vicki mentioned that I think we're getting somewhere around $100 million a year donated from television, radio, print, airports, bus terminals, etc. Yeah, $100 million donated in 2020, an increase of 22% in the last year. So they want to hear the message. And I hope that some of you had a chance to see the film. It's called Do Something, which is, Vicki mentioned that more than once. And it's the story of Jeffrey. And we've already had 134,000 views of the film and trailer. And maybe there's even more because of some of you that had a chance to see it. Post impressions on social media, we have big numbers. As you can see, they're flowing in here, and they continue to rise over the period of time. So public awareness and social media is interconnected. Our website has got a lot of information, an expert locator and centers of excellence, and is accessed vigorously. And then Vicki mentioned our centers network, and you now know the size of it. It's all over the world, still growing. This is Vanessa's favorite slide. She puts this one together, which flows all the countries that have Jeffrey Modell centers, countries and states in the United States that have the centers. And there are many multiple centers in countries and states as well. So Dr. Roseman was the creator of the Jeffrey Modell Centers Network. I think we had 2 or 3 centers, and now look at the size of it. In fact, 75% of the world population has at least one Jeffrey Modell Center in it: China, India, Russia, Pakistan, and millions of lives have been impacted by the Jeffrey Modell Foundation. So the Centers Network is very much around the world. And what did it do? I said it would be edgy because I said we can do this together. Well, the network expanded by more than 25% in 2020 and still growing, 258,000 patients. Our research program is translational and specific defect, and for healthcare disparities, especially in developing countries, the children program. It's quite extensive. 75 grants were awarded to date. $5.3 million research support to date. And then we have the Harvard Immunology Center, which we built about 10 years ago. It's on the main campus of Harvard and is a center for immunology in the Longwood area. The WIN program, Vicki mentioned, right? 275 grants for patient organizations around the world and funding for 183 Kids Days. So we not only do the research, we do the patient program, and we're active at it. We've awarded more than $1.7 million to patient groups. And the Roots and Wings program, this is another creation of Vicki's, where she makes sure that the family and the patient is able to get to centers of excellence like there are in Canada for bone marrow transplant, gene therapy, and other interventions. Newborn screening for SCID, well, Vicki's right. It took us 10 years to get the attention of the government. But then in 2008, we started a pilot program in Wisconsin. And wouldn't you know, we found one child right away. The child was a SCID. We had the baby transplanted, and the baby was cured. And today's, 14 years old, 15 years old. We've instituted in all 50 states to date. At least 30 million, it's probably 35 million in the United States have been screened. 1 in 30,000 affected by SCID, 1 in 16,000 with T-cell lymphopenia, and it's sensitive and specific. And it's in other parts of the world. By the way, we had no luck until we did the whole US population. We had to do it state by state. When we finished, then suddenly the other countries said we would at least pilot the program. So there's about 14 countries that are doing population screening and about another 10 that are piloting. We created a global resolution, and this is something you can use, which calls for the things we're just talking about right now. But the important thing is that 340 expert physicians signed that, and we can send that resolution to government agencies. And sequencing, genetic sequencing. We introduced something called Jeffrey's Insights. The diagnostic odyssey is very unfair to the patient and very expensive and doesn't lead to much in the way of outcomes. And physicians said there were pre-approved processes, burdensome co-payments, and access to genetic tests that they don't get to. And so we said, let's do something. And we set up a program called Jeffrey's Insights and said, let's try it first with a pilot program. And we did. We selected 21 centers, half in the US, half outside the US. The goal of the initiative was to identify a specific defect, management, and treatment. And clearly, all of this has been published, so I'm going to run through the slides quickly. But the condition of these patients was virtually hopeless, and this has all been published. And so, at no cost to the physicians, the patients, the hospital, or the insurance company or government agency, we set this up. We utilized the in vitro program with 207 genes. And here's what happened. This is the most important slide. 45% of the responding physicians altered their suspected diagnosis. 40% of the patients had a change in disease management. 36% of the patients had a change in treatment. 45% of the patients had a change in outcomes, and 80% of the patients could access an approved therapy. Things changed when we introduced sequencing. Changed for the patient and changed for the diagnosis, management, and treatment. So the experts are right when it comes to a need for genetic tests. We published, that's why I ran through it quickly. We published this, it's in a scientific journal in 2020. We published it, and you can access it on our website. We then went to offer it to our entire network in the same way without cost. And the panel was increased from 207 to 407 genes. On average, same situation, the patients were quite sick and the cost of care was enormous. So the quality of life was poor and the cost was tremendous. And the results to date, we now have 278 centers have joined this program. 1,072 patients were sequenced from 60 cities and 40 countries. This says 4891 variants. It's actually over 6,000 variants are now identified in these patients, and 95% of the genes were identified in these patients, the primary deficiency genes. So clinical diagnosis, disease management, treatment, and genetic counseling were altered in more than 50% of the patients. Things changed. And this is just a summary of the pilot program and the global outreach. And this will all be published. We got beautiful letters from our centers and our doctors, but there's one that really comes to mind. Notice on this one, we got 9 results so far that have changed a lot in the management of our patients. 3 out of 9 of these patients were transplanted successfully. They didn't know what was wrong with them. They got them sequenced and then they got them transplanted. It's a new day for primary deficiency patients, and together we can enhance their quality of life, one gene at a time. So back to our 5 steps, and I'm convinced that we have this right now, and you can use this right now: education, awareness, the Centers Network, newborn screening, and genetic sequencing. And that caused me to think about where we are now in our understanding of science, genetics, discovery, and immunology. Today, we are truly at the brink of extraordinary breakthroughs in primary deficiency and related disorders. Exome and next generation sequencing, CRISPR-Cas9, antiviral T-cell therapy, and many new technologies are giving us an opportunity for significant advances. Costs are going down. We're poised to embark on an era that will surely produce spectacular achievements. And that led me to think further of another period of extraordinary genius and output that flourished in classical music at the end of the 18th and beginning of the 19th century. Over a very brief period of time, we had Franz Haydn, who wrote over 100 symphonies. We had Mozart, whose life spanned only 35 years, but in those years he wrote over 600 compositions. He began writing when he was 4. We had Beethoven and Schubert, who lived for only 31 years, but in 1 year alone, he wrote more than 150 compositions. And it's hard to believe that Haydn, Mozart, Beethoven, and Schubert all lived in the same city, Vienna, at the same time. Even Toronto can't boast of that. Shortly thereafter, we had Mendelssohn, a genius at age 16, and Chopin, whose great works were produced before he was 19. Liszt, Schumann, Berlioz, Wagner, Brahms, and more. These artists expressed their genius in unimaginable ways, far beyond our ability to understand their world. There is no way to account for this enormous outburst of inspirational expression in such a short time. It is quite simply overwhelming, unimaginable, and miraculous. And I think the case can now be made that for us, it is the field of science and medicine, and for us, it is equally miraculous and unimaginable. Investigators can approach their understanding of diseases like primary on these separate levels: molecular medicine, genetic medicine, and genomic medicine. Think of it. Today, from a single drop of blood, we can print out a patient's genetic code, scan markers, unknown variations. And in a growing number of cases, we can modify gene expression and actually stop a disease from occurring. Today's genomic platform can optimize whole genome, whole exome, and targeted next generation sequencing in search of clues to inherit conditions, allow us to efficiently identify the causative mutations. So this is revolutionary and absolutely extraordinary. 2 eras, think about it. The beginning of the 19th and the 21st centuries, separated by 200 years, classical music and scientific discovery, unrelated disciplines, yet intimately intertwined and connected by unprecedented accomplishments that profoundly define the period. Every family will be affected. There's great excitement, there is great hope, there are great challenges, and there are great opportunities. The music, that is performed by all of us, building a network, creating harmony, and eventually a symphony. Together we can produce the greatest symphony ever, inspired by new medicine, embedded with unimaginable innovative technology, expressed by brilliant investigators, and harmonized by our collective commitment to excellence and confidence that discovery will flourish. This symphony will impact the lives of patients and provide hope, enrich lives, create dreams, and together we will rejoice in the most exciting period of scientific discovery ever. For us, as we look back, Vicki and I know that there is only one conductor of this great symphony, and his name is Jeffrey. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fred, and thank you very much, Vicki, for this very powerful discussion with us and all your accomplishment. I think it's not only catalyst that you have been like leaders in our field for the last 50 years, and it's been very inspiring for all of us. I'm still a young clinical immunologist, and I'm still so inspired by listening to you. Just to open the discussion, I was reflecting on the people around you and on that, the incredible team that you have that are part of the Jeffrey Modell Foundation. Could you speak to us a little bit about how you found the people that were really helpful, and how you chose the people to be part of that team? Because that's something that we as clinician scientists face. We have to make the good choices for our own academic teams to go forward. So what tips could you give to young clinician scientists of the mentors and sponsors that they have to have around them to go forward?
Well, I guess my first thought is that they need a good mentor. And I think once they have a good mentor who really cares about their future and the path that they're going to take in their career, I think that's a really, really important piece. And I know that from physicians like Chaim Roseman and other immunologists in our field, that they have mentored so many young people over the years. And those young people are now the heads of their own departments and scattered throughout the world. The beauty of it is that some of them came from outside of the country, whether it be Canada or US or wherever, and studied with a great mentor like Chaim Roseman, and then took all that knowledge, all that brilliance, all the confidence back with them to their home country so that they could help the children and patients there. I think that's really the beginning, is the mentor. And then perhaps to get to know a patient organization in the area that you wish to take your career, people like us, to write to us, to get to know us. And perhaps we can even guide you as to where you should go next. And we have done that for several physicians. So I think that's my initial thought, is the mentor, the number one person.
It reminds me of a conversation, I think you know this one, Dr. Roseman, that I spoke with Fred Roseman before he passed away. And I said, we're just beginning in this and we're not doctors and we don't know. How will we know that we have the right person?
Right.
And he says, excellence, chase excellence, and you will know it when you see it. And it's absolutely been true. Dr. Roseman helped us bring to the centers, and they are excellent. I mean, we have not been disappointed in our center directors.
No. We're so proud of so many of the young people that we watch them grow up in front of our very eyes. We may have given them an award or a reward over the years, and now to see them so respected by their colleagues and their peers, really a beautiful thing. And I hope all the young people that are listening today know that it can happen. And it's difficult if you stay in research. It's difficult to get the funding and the grants, and you're always writing grants. But we encourage you to stay with it. It will come, and just pursue the science and hopefully discoveries that you wish to make. Just keep pursuing it. The funding will come.
There's Marilee Brockway was asking, what does excellent mean to you? How do you know when you see it? Like, how are you sure that it is excellence?
That's interesting, because we said to Dr. Rosen, how will we know excellence when we see it? We're not doctors. And he said, you'll know it when you see it. And somewhere in your gut or in your heart, you feel it. It's like intuition. It's like a sixth sense that you just know it when you see it. I think we're all capable of seeing that. And I know we've done it so many times over the years. Just yesterday, at another conference, a young woman, a young immunologist that we had given an award to, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, was the keynote speaker at this gigantic medical conference. And I know I was sitting there listening to her and beaming that we knew that she was going to be the top of her field. We just knew it. And she is. So that's how you know it. It's a gut feeling.
I'm just checking if, Ori, do you want to, I see that you open your camera. Do you want to ask a question maybe? No?
Oh, I didn't want to ask a question, but if I have this opportunity, maybe I can make a small comment. Hi, my name is Ori. By the way, I'm one of the immunology fellows at CCHCSP.
Oh.
I'm actually very humbled right now that my mentor, Dr. Roseman, is also on this call.
We are.
I wanted to thank you for taking the time to speak here today and say that a lot of what you said resonated with me, because when I first entered immunology, the things that I felt initially were that there's a lot of unknowns for our patients and for us in this field, which I think probably applies to a lot of fields where we treat patients with rare genetic diseases. But it's so often that not only do I have a treatment for my patient, I don't even know how to name what it is that they have. And I realized that the reason why I came into this field is not to feel helpless. And if I am feeling helpless, then it's my job to put in all the effort and energy that I can to try and understand how to gain insight about what my patients have and how to treat it. And that is why I chose to become a clinician scientist in immunology. So I just wanted to thank you so much for echoing these sentiments and for supporting people like me around the world in these efforts. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for those really beautiful comments. And are you able to do the genetic sequencing? Were you at CCHCSP? Because
yeah, so I work with Dr. Weifman, and yes, he does a lot of genetic sequencing.
So just if you ever and I am also, if a physician like this Ori, who's just breathtaking, if you would like us to include you in our Jeffrey's Insights program, we certainly would love to. You're part of the network, and we can do that. So please let us know. You can email us. Okay, and hi,
I really appreciate it.
Oh, we would love to do that, so that you never have to shrug your shoulders and say, I don't know what this person has. I have no idea. That's what Fred and I heard for 15 years, too much with Jeffrey. And I just don't want another family to have to do that. So if we can, find a cause for the disease, please All right, you'll write to us either at info4PI or yeah. And Dr. Roseman has my email, and Linda Pyrus and everybody. Okay?
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
We'd love.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that probably part of the charm and what keeps us going, even in our age, I'm referring to my age, is still the unknown. And there is still so much to do. And we are so lucky to have Vicki and Fred on our side for the future. So we've done a lot, but there is a long, long way to go. And it's so wonderful to have such partners that go along with you. So you know that things are going to get better and better with time. So while I have your attention for a second, there is not much I could add to Vicki and Fred's introduction of their foundation, but there are a couple of things, two things that I'd like to say. First, it's quite amazing that this family, Vicki and Fred, came out of a personal tragedy, the way they went through, and decide to actually make something of it and change the world. And single-handedly, this foundation that is based on the dedication of these two people, their talents, and their courage to stand up and do it all these years, they have actually changed the fate of an entire field single-handedly. I don't think there is any precedent in medicine of a field that has been changed by a charity the way these people have done. I'm not going into the specifics because Vicki and Fred did it better than me, but there's so many other things they haven't really even mentioned. Involvement with the WHO, classifications, involvement with the Gates Foundation for all kinds of endeavors and projects, and many, many more. So we are lucky, really lucky. And I'd like to thank you, Vicki and Fred, personally, for helping all our patients and our physicians, trainees, and everybody that you touched to get to the point we are now. The field of PAD would not have been today without your contributions. Definitely, I can say that because I was there throughout that process. So thank you wholeheartedly from me personally. There was a question by ULM that I think was taken a little bit the other way. I think you were asking what you could do as a young investigator, right, to get to such help in such entities. Am I right with that question?
Somebody else.
No, my reflection was more about their, all of the learning that they did through those 30 years at building this big foundation, how they found the good partners and sponsors and people that they could really work with, because, and I had a question for, I had a question for Fred, like, is your expertise as a businessman, when you were doing your jewelry shop and everything, did that really help to build the foundation? Because this is so impressive from my standpoint. So, I'm looking to you and I say, how could they do that? This is just so magnificent, So I was wondering where you found all the expertise to be able to go to the politics and convince them, and then go to all of those doctors and convince them, and go to, you had to have so much, not just energy and drive coming from Jeffrey, but even like qualities, and so that's what I was wondering how you managed to build all of those people around you to be able to drive this up to such a great impact worldwide.
There's a secret to your earlier question too. First, in terms of finding excellence, chasing excellence, here's the little secret, only among us: collaboration. If that investigator says, I'm working on something and I really don't want to discuss it, and I'm not working with the guy that's down the street or across the country, that's not for us. That's not for us. Work together, and that is the beginning of chasing excellence. So that's one key. The second thing is, I found, based on my business, I was in the diamond business and jewelry business, that self-interest, even going to the Congress, even going to the NIH, self-interest. Yes, we want to do something. We don't have the resources to do all the things we'd like to do. We have some resources. You have more resources. Let's do it together. And that was the key. And Dr. Roseman, I have to turn the tide on you. You're the one who said collaboration is the key. And we only had one or two, I think we had 2 centers when we started.
Yeah.
And now look at the size of it all over the world. So,
but I think Fred's being a little modest or humble, but he is a brilliant businessman. And so you're right that business mind helped, direct our foundation. So it's run like a corporation. And we say that to each other, that it is like a company, and the patients are our customers, and doctors too. Everybody's our customer. We have to be able to accommodate so many different people.
And just to add, in believing in the mission, I mean, once you say, this is what we want to do, you have to say it, you have to express it, you have to be clear about it. You can't fumble on the edges. You've got to say, this is what we need. The same way we talked about the things that we can do now at this stage, which is remarkable that we can do this much in science. And so I think the commitment has got to be absolute and clear. And there'll be some times, I must say, when we started newborn screening, Dr. Roseman knows this, we were thrown out of more offices than we were accepted at. They said, we have no money for this. This is a rare disease. We're not going to screen all these babies. Are you kidding?
Went through the same in Canada for 7 years. So
yeah.
So I said, and then there came a time I don't know if you remember, Secretary Sebelius was our health secretary. And we went to visit her in her office, and I said, gee, we're very disappointed. We only got 2 states that are even interested. She said, it's all money. That's what they're talking about. And we got back on the plane, Vicki and I went back and says, what would happen if we took money off the table? So we went back to some of the states and said, okay, we're putting up the money. Now, what do you want to talk about? Tell us what you'd like to talk about. Well, there's really nothing to talk about. So I pledged the money to do the screening. Then when it came time to send the check, I really wanted to send the check because I pledged it. They said, we found the money.
They found it.
We didn't. I said, why don't you tell me that in the beginning? So there are some business issues. I think when people start telling any of you, well, there's a problem with budgets. We don't have the funds for this. You have to say, wait a minute, we can find it somehow. Maybe it's government, maybe it's insurance companies, maybe it's donors like that we know, maybe it's charities like Jeffrey Modell Foundation. Some way, somehow, we put it together and we can do it, assuming it's something that we want to do. And I think you have to be a little bit businesslike in science.
Or you just move on, on. That's all you can.
There's a question from Jeffrey McCrossan, who's saying, thank you so much for the talk and making the film. I'm wondering if you could share your perspective on how our medical systems can support families with the unknown and all of the emotion that come with it, waiting for science to keep up, because that's still the case even in 2021.
Yeah, certainly with rare diseases, the diagnostic journey, as they call it, can be forever. But I feel optimistic that with sequencing, we can find the defect, the gene that's causing the disorder. So I'm very optimistic that science is catching up a lot faster than it used to. I think it's going very fast. But am I answering your question, Jeffrey?
It was also how the...
May I weigh in?
Yes, please.
Question. Yeah, I'd like to weigh in here. It's a very good question that we actually deal with every day. And having the perspective of so many years, starting with the time that we really knew much less before sequencing. It's a process that continues to date. And what guides or guided me, at least over the years, is a simple a principle. We actually keep complete honesty with the patient, and we keep them updated all the time about the progress. We always, when we don't know, we say we don't know. What we know, we reveal, and we continue to work on it. I always told my patients, you know, we don't know what you have now, but rest assured that I will continue to work on your condition for many, many years. It may take 2 weeks, it may take 20 years until we know, but eventually we will. And now I've come to a point where I can say, yes, 20 years ago, and people come and said, you told us, and finally after 15 years now with all genome sequencing, we finally identified it. So I think the answer to the question is that you really have to have a good relationship with your patient. Keep them informed all the time about progress in the field, progress in their condition, and progress of your work in the lab, or your progress in understanding. Even if you don't have the final answer yet, keep them informed of what you do and what you have arrived to until that point. In my experience, it works extremely well with patients. And yes, from time to time they say, well, it took 5 years and we still don't know, or it took 10 years and we still don't know. We still have to go back to the basics of telling them what's known and not, and continue. I don't recall one that actually withdrew a consent at that point over all these years. So it takes some experience as well, but I think these are the principles.
What a beautiful answer. That's why your patients love you so much.
So I think you can,
And we do too.
we together, we can summarize that and say, set the bar high, but not so high that we can't reach it.
That's
And then give the greatest gift of all to the patient, and that is hope. We're working on transplantation. We're working on gene therapy. We're working on gene editing.
Hope is
We're working on so many different research projects.
Yeah.
That is the greatest gift you can give to any
And to
patient.
share your knowledge with the family.
And
That's
that's what
all you can do.
Dr. Roseman does that all the time, and we've seen the results of that. And it's not hype. It's absolute. They're at the bench and they're coming up with answers, and that's what happened with the sequencing. It surprised us more than it surprised anyone else. We said they changed the management, the treatment, the diagnosis, and the even in some cases the cures. So it's a gift to say we're working on understanding better and giving you hope.
Yeah.
Just give you an example of my clinic today, where a patient asked, I was told that IVIG or immunoglobulin, in his case SCID, which is sub-Q, is for life. I had to spend about 15-20 minutes explaining what's for life. For life means, according to our knowledge to date, it appears that is the treatment for life. But that base of knowledge can change with the progress in technology, in science, and so on. So what may look to us a lifelong annoyance of annoying treatment of getting infusions or getting injected all the time may disappear in 10 years with no technology. So for the future that we see now with the current technologies that we have and knowledge, it is the treatment of choice. But that may change with time, and will likely change with time as we see progress in science and technology.
We hope so. Wow.
So I wanted to thank you both, Vicki and Fred, for this very inspiring and powerful discussion and talk with us, and for all your amazing involvement in primary immunodeficiency over the years in memory of Jeffrey. So we're very thankful to both of you, to Dr. Reifman, to be part of our discussion today.